You know, turning 63 wasn't quite what I expected. I pictured maybe slowing down a bit, enjoying grandkids if I had them, pottering in the garden. What I didn't expect was feeling, well, hopeless, like the best years were behind me, and the road ahead was just a slow decline. Every morning felt like pulling myself out of quicksand. Energy was non-existent. My body ached in places it never had before. And honestly, my mind felt fuzzy, like it was wrapped in cotton wool. It wasn't just feeling tired. It was a deep weariness, a lack of spark, a feeling that I had nothing left to contribute, nothing left to look forward to. I remember looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person staring back, not physically, but in their eyes. They looked empty, like a light had gone out. I tried pretending I was fine, but inside, there was just this hollow space. It felt like I was just waiting, just existing. It was a painful reality, a quiet despair that's hard to admit, even to yourself. But then, something shifted. I was at my lowest point, wondering if this was just how it was going to be from now on. And I stumbled upon something, a different way of looking at things, a few simple changes. It wasn't a miracle cure, nothing overnight, but it was something. It was this. In this video, I want to share with you what this was for me. These aren't complicated things. No expensive gadgets or impossible diets. Just simple habits, simple approaches that helped build back my energy, clear my mind, and most importantly, rekindle that spark. We'll look at the specific actions I took, the tiny steps that led me out of that feeling of hopelessness. Watch to the end, because there was something unexpected that happened along the way. Something that genuinely surprised me and changed everything. So, where do you even begin when you feel like you're starting from zero? Or even worse, from a negative place? For me, the idea of big changes felt utterly overwhelming. I could barely muster the energy to get dressed some days, let alone embark on a major health overhaul. That's why the first step I took felt almost ridiculously small. It wasn't about running a marathon or lifting heavy weights. It was about moving my body, just a little bit, every single day. I started with walking, not a brisk, power walk, just walking, around the block, if that felt too much, just to the end of the street and back. Some days, it was literally just walking to the mailbox and standing there for a minute, feeling the sun or the rain on my face. The key wasn't speed or distance. It was consistency and presence. I remember the first few times I forced myself out. My legs felt heavy, my joints creaked, and my mind kept telling me it was pointless, that it wouldn't make a difference. But I ignored the voice and just focused on putting one foot in front of the other. I paid attention to the world around me, the color of the leaves, the sound of a bird, the feel of the breeze. It was slow. Almost painfully slow progress at first. Maybe I added 5 extra steps the next day, then 10. After a couple of weeks of doing this every morning, something subtle started to happen. It wasn't a burst of energy, not yet. It was more like the quicksand loosened slightly. It was still there, but I wasn't sinking quite as fast. My body felt a tiny bit less stiff. My breathing felt a little easier. It was just enough to make me think, okay, maybe don't stop yet. This simple movement also started to have a ripple effect on my mind. When you're feeling hopeless, your thoughts can become very small, very negative, just looping the same old worries. Walking, even slowly, seemed to interrupt that loop. It gave my mind something else to do, something else to focus on. It wasn't meditation, not in a formal sense, but it was mindful movement, just being outside, in the world, even for a short time, reminded me that there was a world outside of my 4 walls and my internal struggles. It was like a tiny crack of light in the darkness I was feeling. I started setting incredibly low bars for myself. Just walk to the corner. If I got there and felt awful, I could turn back. But often, once I was out, I'd feel okay enough to go a little further. This wasn't about pushing through pain. It was about gentle persistence. It taught me that even when you feel completely depleted, there is usually a tiny reserve you can tap into if you're willing to just start small. And the feeling of having done that one small thing, that walk, no matter how short, gave me a tiny sense of accomplishment each day. When you feel like you're achieving nothing, even checking that one tiny box makes a difference. It built a minuscule amount of momentum. That little bit of daily movement became the bedrock. It didn't fix everything, not by a long shot. But it was the first stone I laid on the path out of the quicksand. It was proof that I could still do something, even when I felt I couldn't, building on that tiny bit of momentum from the walking. The next area I looked at wasn't about grand gestures either, but small, simple changes to what I was eating. I hadn't been eating terribly before, not living on junk food, but I also wasn't paying attention. Meals were often quick, convenient, and frankly, a bit bland and repetitive because I lacked motivation. I realized that if my body felt heavy and sluggish, maybe the fuel I was giving it wasn't helping. Again, I didn't overhaul my entire diet overnight. That felt impossible. I focused on adding 1 or 2 simple things. The first thing I consciously started adding was more water. I know, it sounds basic, doesn't it? But when you're feeling low, even remembering to drink enough water can be a challenge. I started keeping a jug of water on the counter and making an effort to refill my glass more often. Dehydration, even mild, can make you feel tired, fuzzy-headed, and just generally unwell. Increasing my water intake didn't dramatically change my life, but it was another layer of basic self-care I had neglected. It felt like tending to a very neglected plant, just giving it the basic nourishment it needed. Then, I started thinking about adding more color to my plate. Not artificial colors, but the vibrant colors of vegetables and fruits. I wasn't suddenly cooking gourmet meals. I started simply by adding a handful of spinach to my eggs in the morning, or making sure I had a piece of fruit as a snack instead of reaching for something sugary or processed. I started buying pre-cut vegetables if chopping felt like too much effort. Anything to lower the barrier to entry. A simple salad with lunch. Some steamed broccoli with dinner. Nothing fancy. It was about adding nutrients, vitamins, and fiber that my body was likely craving without me even realizing it. I read somewhere that certain nutrients, like B vitamins and omega-3s, are really important for brain function and mood. And foods like leafy greens, berries, and some nuts and seeds are packed with them. So, I'd try to sprinkle some seeds on my yogurt or add some berries to my breakfast. Again, the changes were small, almost imperceptible on a daily basis. But over time, combined with the gentle movement, I started noticing another subtle shift. My digestion improved. I felt less bloated. And gradually, very gradually, some of that mental fog started to lift. It wasn't a sudden clarity, but more like the edges of the fog became a little less dense. It felt like these simple foods were giving my body and brain the building blocks they needed to start repairing themselves after a long period of neglect. It wasn't just about the physical body, though. Feeling hopeless is deeply connected to feeling isolated and disconnected. Even if you have family or friends, when you're in that state, you often withdraw. You don't want to be a burden, or you feel you have nothing positive to contribute. This was a huge part of my own struggle. So, the next step I took, which felt incredibly difficult at the time, was about finding ways to reconnect. Again, I started small. I didn't force myself into large social gatherings. That would have been too overwhelming. It began with just reaching out to one person, Maybe sending a text to a friend I hadn't spoken to in a while, just to say hello. Or calling a family member. It wasn't about having a long, deep conversation about how I was feeling. I wasn't ready for that yet. It was just a simple acknowledgement of connection. I'm thinking of you. Hope you're well. Then, I started trying to have tiny, brief interactions with people I encountered during my day. Smiling at the cashier at the grocery store. Saying hello to a neighbor I passed on my walk. These might seem like insignificant things, but when you feel invisible, even a brief, positive exchange can make you feel a little more seen, a little more human. I also looked for opportunities for slightly longer, low-pressure interactions, maybe joining a local low-key activity that didn't require much commitment, a gentle yoga class, a walking group, or a craft circle. Something where the focus wasn't on intense socializing, but just being in the presence of other people, sharing space, perhaps exchanging a few casual words. The first few times I did this, my anxiety was through the roof. My heart would pound, and I'd worry about what to say or how I'd come across. But I reminded myself that the goal wasn't to become the life of the party. It was just to dip my toe back into the waters of human connection. And almost every time, it wasn't nearly as bad as I'd feared. Sometimes, it was even pleasant. A friendly smile here, a shared laugh there. These moments were like little sparks, tiny reminders that the world wasn't just full of my own internal struggles, but also contained warmth and connection if I was willing to seek it out. However tentatively, it was through these small interactions that I started to remember what it felt like to be part of something larger than just my own feeling of hopelessness. It showed me that even when you feel like you have nothing to give, simply being present and open to a smile or a kind word is a form of connection that nourishes both yourself and others. This reaching out, this small effort to connect, became another crucial piece of the puzzle, helping to chip away at the wall of isolation I had built around myself. It wasn't instant relief, but it was progress, slow and steady, towards feeling like I belonged again. And that feeling is incredibly powerful when you felt utterly alone. So, I was slowly building this foundation, gentle movement, more attention to simple, nourishing food, and tentative steps towards reconnecting with others. Each piece on its own felt small, almost insignificant sometimes. But together, they were starting to create a noticeable shift. My energy levels were still a far cry from my younger days, but I wasn't fighting that heavy inertia constantly. The mental fog was clearer, allowing me to focus a little better, to read a book, or follow a conversation without feeling lost. The feeling of being alone in the world was slowly receding as I allowed small moments of connection into my life. But there was still one more crucial piece to this. Something that wasn't a physical habit or a food, but a shift in perspective, a change in how I talk to myself. When you feel hopeless, your inner voice can be incredibly harsh and critical. It tells you you're not good enough, that you've missed your chance, that it's too late for you. I realized that even as I was taking these small positive actions, this negative self-talk was constantly trying to pull me back down. So, I started actively challenging it. This didn't come naturally. It felt awkward and forced at first. When the voice said, "Why bother walking? You're still tired," I'd try to counter it with something like, "But I did it today, and that's more than I did last month." When it said, "You messed that up," I'd try to say, "Okay, that didn't go perfectly, but I learned something." It was about being a little kinder to myself, acknowledging the effort rather than just focusing on perceived failures or limitations. I also started consciously looking for small things to appreciate each day. This is often called gratitude practice. And again, it felt a bit forced initially, but I started simple. The warmth of my coffee in the morning, the feel of my comfortable chair, the sunbeam coming through the window. Just one or two tiny things. It wasn't about ignoring the difficulties, but about training my brain to notice that not everything was negative. It was like shining a tiny flashlight into the dark corners of my mind, finding little spots of light and focusing on them for a moment. This conscious effort to shift my internal narrative, to be less critical and more appreciative, was incredibly powerful. It didn't erase the negative thoughts entirely, but it weakened their grip. It created space for a little more self-compassion and a little more optimism. It helped me see that I wasn't defined solely by the feeling of hopelessness, but that there were still things to experience, things to appreciate, and that my efforts, no matter how small, were worthwhile. Putting these pieces together, the consistent gentle movement, the focus on simple, nourishing foods, the effort to reconnect with others, and the conscious work on my mindset was this. It wasn't a single, dramatic solution, but a combination of small, consistent actions that I layered into my life, one step at a time. There were days when I felt like giving up, days when the old feelings of hopelessness would creep back in. But because I had started with such small, manageable steps, it was easier to get back on track. I didn't have to climb a mountain. I just had to take the next small step forward. And as I continued with these simple habits, something unexpected started happening. It wasn't just that I felt a bit better physically or mentally. There was a deeper shift. Remember how I said I'd share something that surprised me as I started feeling a little better, a little more capable, and a little more connected? I found myself wanting to share this feeling, not in a preachy way, but just by being more present with the people around me. I started really listening when a friend talked. I offered a genuine smile to strangers. I found myself having the energy and inclination to help someone with a small task. And as I did this, I noticed the reaction I got back. People responded with warmth, with kindness, with their own smiles. It was like putting positive energy out into the world and having it reflected back. This wasn't something I had planned or even considered when I was just trying to pull myself out of the quicksand. I was focused purely on feeling less awful. But the act of gently re-engaging with life, both internally and externally, created this beautiful, unexpected feedback loop. The more I put into these simple actions, the walking, the nourishing food, the connection, the positive self-talk, the more hope and vitality I seemed to get back. And the real surprise was discovering a renewed sense of purpose, not in some grand predefined way, but in the simple act of living and connecting. It was in finding joy in the small things again, in a perfectly ripe piece of fruit, the warmth of a friendly voice, the quiet satisfaction of completing a short walk. It was in realizing that I wasn't done, that there was still so much life to be lived, to be experienced, and yes, even to be contributed. That feeling of hopelessness at 63 wasn't the end. It was a turning point. It was the push I needed, however unwelcome it felt at the time, to seek out these simple ways of nurturing myself back to life. Looking back now, it's incredible to see how far I've come from that feeling of being completely lost and hopeless. It wasn't a miracle, no magic pill. It was just a series of small, consistent choices, choosing to move a little each day, choosing to put good, simple food into my body, choosing to reach out and connect, even when it was hard, choosing to challenge that negative voice in my head and look for the good. These simple habits, woven together, created the tapestry of this that pulled me out of the darkness. Remember, you don't have to make huge changes all at once. Start small. Find one simple thing you can do today. Maybe it's just a 5-minute walk, or adding an extra glass of water, or sending a quick text to someone you care about. Small changes really can make a big difference to your health, your happiness, and your entire outlook. Don't underestimate the power of these seemingly insignificant steps. They build momentum. They build resilience. and they build hope. If any of this resonates with you, if you felt anything similar, I'd really love to hear from you. Share your thoughts or your own experiences in the comments below. What's one small step you've taken, or one you feel you could take? Let's encourage each other. And if you found this video helpful or uplifting, please give it a like. It helps other people who might be feeling the same way find it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more ideas and support on living your best life at every age. It's never too late to find your spark again. Live your best life at every age.